Hey everyone, my name is Marvin and I like zombies. Today I'll be crafting the Zombie Yeti from Plant vs Zombies, complete with a matching base. First things first, as always we're starting with the skeleton of the figure. For that I'm using my trusty thick craft wire. I start by marking the length of the torso and then connect it with more wires for the legs. Using a marker I mark where the feet will go. Next I drill 2 holes into my wooden base, which act as a stand during the crafting process. Insert the skeleton, position one leg and trim it to the correct length. Next up as always is aluminium foil. This helps bulk out the skeleton to the right thickness, so we use as little clay as possible and keep the figure lightweight. I wrap the legs with thinner wire to give the clay something to grip onto. Now it's time for the good old reliable Super Sculpey. I'm using Super Sculpey Living Doll for this project. Step by step I add small layers of clay to the surface until I've built up the first base layer of clay. I smooth out the surface with my ball stylus tool and my fingers, then add another layer of clay to the back and belly to bulk those areas up a bit more. Next up are the legs. Here too I keep adding more and more clay, slowly building up thicker and chunkier legs. At this stage it's not about the details, it's all about getting the right math and rough shape for the figure. Once the legs are thick enough, I smooth out the surface again with my fingers. Then I repeat the same process on the other leg, layering clay bit by bit until I get the right shape and thickness to match the proportions of my reference. After that I blend the surface once more. Next I grab my trusty wood tool and start roughly shaping the folds and creases where the legs meet the lower body. After that I add 2 pieces of clay to the back, giving the Yeti its nice plumpy booty chic. Now it's time to tackle the head. I start by wrapping a small ball of aluminium foil in clay and rolling it into a nice smooth sphere with my hands. Then I add another piece of clay to shape the shin area. To widen the jawline, I attach 2 more pieces of clay on either sides. Using my trusty ball stylus tool I sculpt the eye sockets into the head. Next I add the upper lip with another piece of clay and smooth it out using my spoon tool. I shape the downward grim expression for the mouth and start adding details to the eyes. Then it's time for the sniffing holes, which I carefully sculpt into place. I pop on 2 small balls of clay to define the cheekbones and blend everything together for a seamless look. Realizing the shin's still a little stubby, I back it up with some more clay. Finally I attach the Yeti's tongue inside its mouth and add a few details to really bring it to life. With the tongue complete I move on to sculpting the forehead area. I start by placing a small roll of clay on the upper part of the head and blending it into the surface. To build up the structure further, I add 2 small pieces of clay to the sides of the head, blending those in as well. Slowly but surely the Yeti's forehead starts to take shape. Finally I smooth out the surface using a bit of isopropyl alcohol. Next I sculpt a socket in the Yeti's torso using my ball stylus tool. With a bit of baking powder I attach the head to the body. Using more clay I blend the head into the body, building up the neck area and shape the top of the head into its oval form, basically sculpting the bump on top of his head. Next the Yeti gets his eyes, I insert 2 pre-baked eyes into his eye sockets. Next up are the feet. Using my hobby knife I remove a bit of clay from the bottom of the legs. Then I add more clay to slowly build up the basic shape of the foot, refining it as I go. With my sculpting tool I divide the foot into 5 toes. I then refine the shape of each toe using my silicone tool, adding more and more details. Finally with my spoon tool I sculpt the toenails onto the toes, giving the foot its finishing touch. Using a bit of baking powder I attach the second foot to the other leg. This one I sculpt off camera. Next I use the marker to indicate the spots where I want to attach the arms. Grabbing my drill I make a hole in each marked spot on the upper body. After cleaning off the mess from my table, I secure 2 pieces of wire into the drilled holes with a bit of super glue. These wires will act as a skeleton for the Yeti arms. I start by covering the first arm with clay, shaping it into a thick strong Yeti arm. Bit by bit I keep building up the arm by adding more clay and blending it with my sculpting tools and fingers. Once the first arm is complete I repeat the process for the second arm. Next I sculpt the first hand from a small pieces of clay and attach 5 fingers made from tiny worms like pieces of clay. Using my ball stylus tool I blend the fingers into the hand. Then I trim the fingers to the proper length and add little knuckle bumps to each one. With a bit of baking powder I attach the hand to the arm and use tweezers to position the fingers just right. Finally I detail the finger with my spoon tool, giving each one its own fingernail. Now it's time to craft the iconic sunflower. I start by shaping a piece of clay into an oval, which will serve as a base for the sunflower's head. Using my small ball stylus tool, I sculpt the eye sockets and the mouth into the head. Next I roll out a large sheet of clay with my pasta machine to create a thin petal for the sunflower's head. With my silicone tool I add texture and details to each petal until I have enough of them ready. Then one by one I attach the petals to the head, blending them together and shaping them into a nice arrangement. Finally I refine the facial features to give the sunflower a bit of personality and smooth out the surface with some isopropyl alcohol. For the sunflower stem I insert a thin piece of wire into the back of the sunflower and cover it with clay to shape the stem. Once it's formed I trim it to the right length. To make it look like the Yeti is holding the sunflower, I now sculpt his second hand. Using more clay I shape and form the hand, this time sculpting the fingers directly onto it with my silicone tool. Since it's going to be a closed fist, there's no need to sculpt each finger individually. Once the hand is finished I press the sunflower stem into it and sculpt the clay around the stem, making it look like the hand is gripping the flower naturally. Off camera I added 2 large leaves to the base of the sunflower stem. Now I attach the hand to the other arm and blend it into the forearm. After that I add the thumb. And now it's time for a hairy situation. The Yeti's fur. There are countless ways to sculpt fur, but I went with a method that captured the cartoonish look perfectly, so it's also super time consuming. For each strand of fur I take a tiny piece of clay and roll it into a thin little worm with my fingers, tapering it to a point at the end. One by one I press each of the tiny clay worms onto the Yeti's surface and blend them in. I repeat this process hundreds of times, covering it the entire Yeti in fur. This painstaking process took me hours, but for you, it will just be a few seconds. I hope you enjoy the magic. Once the hairy situation is complete and the Yeti is fully covered in fur, I grab my trusty isopropyl alcohol and smooth out the entire surface of the fur to eliminate any imperfections or fingerprints. With that done, it's time to bake the figure. Into the oven it goes for 30 minutes to harden. Now it's time to start painting. First I grab my airbrush and prime the Yeti in white, ensuring the color that follows will stick better. Next I give the Yeti an ice blue gradient to really nail that frosty cartoonish cold look. For the skin, specifically the hands, feet and face, I start with a dark green base coat, applying multiple layers to ensure solid coverage. Then I go over it with a lighter green that matches the tone of my reference image. I follow up with progressively lighter shades of green, blending them into the Yeti skin to create depth and highlights. For the finishing touch, I use the greenish yellow tone to add the final highlights to the Yeti skin. The sunflower head is base coated in brown, while the leaves and stem get a dark green treatment as well. Next up I switch a lighter brown and coated the entire head of the sunflower. For the petals, I go with a vibrant yellow that truly brings the sunflower to life. The head then get a reddish brown wash, which I blend seamlessly into the base color for added depth. The petals also get a dark yellow wash, where they meet the flower center to create subtle shadows and a sense of dimension. Now let's tackle the Yeti's eyes. I give them a zombie-like yellow wash for the perfect undead vibe. Using my smallest ball stylus tool, I carefully add a tiny red pupil to each eye. The sunflower's eyes are painted their signature black, with a tiny white highlight dot to give them some sparkle. For the Yeti's mouth I apply a pink wash, giving the inner flesh its characteristic glossy lifelike look. I also add highlights to the grooves of the sunflower leaves with a lighter yellow-green tone. The Yeti's teeth, which are pre-sculpted and baked off camera, are the next detail. With some tweezers and a dab of super glue, I attach them securely inside the Yeti's mouth. As a final touch, I coated the Yeti's eyes and the sunflower eyes with a bit of UV resin. This gives them a glossy, lifelike finish that really makes them pop. For the Yeti's base I need a big fir tree. To create it I start with a long piece of my thickest wire and fold it in half. One end goes into the shank of my drill, which I tighten securely, while I hold the other end with pliers. With the press of a button, the wire twists together into a sturdier, thicker wire forming the core of my tree trunk. Next I put on gloves because Super Sculpey Original White tends to stick to your fingers and it's a pain to clean off. I roll out a long thick sausage of clay with my hands and then slice it lengthwise with my craft knife. Spreading it open carefully, I place the twisted wire inside and close it back up. Once sealed, I blend the clay with my hands and roll the sausage again to smooth it out. Using my hobby knife, I carve into the clay to create uneven edges and give the trunk a more rugged natural look. Then I add texture to the surface. Starting with my largest ball stylus tool and working down to a smaller one, I carefully sculpt bark-like patterns into the trunk to capture the tree's texture. Next I insert small pieces of wire into the trunk to create the tree branches. Once all the branches are in place, I carefully remove them and bake the tree trunk in the oven for about 20 minutes. After the trunk is fully hardened, I reattach the wire branches using a bit of super glue to secure them in the pre-made holes. Then it's time to prime the entire tree trunk with a green-brown base coat. Once the primer is dry, I give the tree a nice dry brush with a lighter reddish brown tone. Using a finer detail brush, I add smaller highlights and details to the bark, giving the tree its final polished look. Now that the tree trunk is finished, I brush all the branches with some PVA glue and use my static grass applicator to apply 12 mm long dark green static grass fibers. The glue helps the grass stick to the branches and the static charge makes the fiber stand upright. Unfortunately, I noticed that not enough grass adhered to the branches. Off camera, I sprayed the branches with adhesive spray and apply additional layers of static grass. I also added some of my homemade moss flocking to give the branches more volume and a fuller appearance. For the base, I'm using a sheet of styrofoam that needs to be transformed into a snowy landscape. To do this, I mix up a concoction of sparkling paste, water, salt, white paint and wood glue. I add all the components into a container. The sparkling paste, white paint, glue and water and mix them together until I get a smooth, creamy consistency. Next I apply the paste evenly across the entire surface of my styrofoam base. Once that's done, I take the tree and securely attach it to the base. Next I place the Yeti onto the base to get an imprint of his foot. Now I leave the base to dry completely. I also sculpted another little plant from Plant vs Zombies and attach it to the base as well. Now I brush the entire base with PVA glue and grab this stuff here, snow powder from Green Stuff. This stuff is seriously cool. I actually discovered it from one of the videos on the YouTube channel North of the Border. That channel is absolutely amazing. Definitely go check it out. Next I sprinkle the entire base with the snowflakes. However, once I'm done, I'm not entirely happy with how it looks, so I grab my blue Smurf cup. Yes, I own a blue Smurf cup because the Smurfs are awesome. I pour a good amount of the snowflakes into the cup and mix them with watered down PVA glue. This creates a nice even snow paste that I spread across the base. Once the paste is applied, I sprinkle some more snowflakes over the still wet surface. To finish it off, I add some of the snow paste onto the tree, then I sprinkle more snow powder on top of the tree for extra effect. Finally, I apply some liquid frost onto the plant and a few areas of the Yeti. This stuff forms beautiful crystal textures once it dries. And for the final touch, I use hot glue to attach the Yeti to the base and paint the sides of the base black. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time for the final reveal. And once again, we've made it to the end. That's it for this video. A huge thank you to everyone who stuck around until the end. You're the ones who keeping this channel going through these frosty times. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. With that, I say goodbye and see you next time. Wishing you all a wonderful pre-Christmas season. Bye.